Thank you. One of the things I keep noticing on this retreat is how I'm just enjoying being with everyone so much. And I have the thought that, if I learn nothing and discover nothing and get nowhere, it's just so nice to be with these people. Like I just keep coming back. And I've noticed for some reason this retreat, I don't know, my eyes will find their way up to the screen as we're sitting together, and I'll just find a window and settle on it. And I just get filled with this deep appreciation for the being of each person and the tail of each cat. That there's just this kind of delight that appears, or a wonder, or a kind of, sometimes I'll look and someone's weeping, or sometimes I'll look and someone's having a really hard time being still. And I just think, kind of a crazy, amazing thing, Sesshin, and we come here and do this. I tried to take my mother to Sesshin once, and she just kept saying to me, "Let me guess, more sitting." And I said, "Why, yes, that's exactly what we'll be doing this afternoon." And I think she lasted about a day and a half. Then she said, "I think I've had enough sitting. I'm going to go home now." I said, "Okay, thanks for coming." But it's a, as John Tarrant was saying last night, it's a kind of brave thing we do, actually. And it's not so easy sometimes to just sit and discover the depths and what lies in our own being. And it's so often full of surprises. And I was noticing, like, I mean, you never know, like, I never know what might come to mind. And each talk and each person and each sort of wave of encounter that we have seems to somehow kind of stir the embers of the deep psyche, and some new flame will come into being. And the other morning, as we were sitting, I think it must have been after David's talk, after his stories of being carried and having his head turned, and just suddenly got this wave of memory of someone I knew in my early 20s, and a period of time in my life when I was incredibly profoundly lost, and the ways that a number of people, and it sort of felt like life itself, but a number of people just came to my mind, and tears kind of started running down my face. Just said, "Oh, wow. I didn't even know that that was waiting to be discovered in me, but it's been with me." And it was during a time in my life. So you have to understand, I grew up in Utah. Some of you know that, as a non-Mormon, which is a bit of a strange place to grow up, particularly if you're not Mormon. And I achieved some escape velocity when I was about 21 to go live in San Francisco and work for a integral coaching school. And the trouble started, as Allison would say, the trouble started very quickly after I arrived, because it immediately became clear through a number of people provoking me that maybe I didn't like guys, I liked girls. I thought, nah, no, not true. You don't know me, you don't get to say that. But a number of events in my life started colluding with this provocation. And pretty soon, I wasn't sure at all if I liked guys or I liked girls. And that urgency that Allison was talking about the other day, that is fraught with what kind of a person am I? And maybe I don't know myself at all. And what might the implications of such a discovery be? Felt direly urgent. And so every date and every person I would meet, I would be asking this question, um, who do I like and who should I be with? And do I just have intimacy issues? And, what's all this about? This is the trouble when you're the child of a therapist. You can't, just have your discovery. You're constantly thinking, well, what does this mean about me? And is it true, or is it a problem, or is it, somehow, I don't know. I kept trying to date guys and I kept kissing girls and I kept just getting more and more and more confused. And the urgency just grew. And it was also the case that this was my first real time away from home. And I knew by nature of my background, I could talk to people about like the nature of life and death and their deepest emotional pain, but I had absolutely no idea how to make a life at all. Did not know how to budget, did not know how to set up utility bills, did not know how to do anything, and was suddenly thrust into a position where, was supposed to like be making money and having a life. And so all this was kind of happening. And then about 3 months into it, my dad got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And whatever little tiny grip on the life I thought I was building I had quickly became unhinged. And in a strange way, that was really hard, but it wasn't even the worst of my problems. Like I had no idea who I was. I had no idea who I should be trying to be. I had no idea really even, in a sense, what to hold on to. It was midnight. There was no sun, no moon, no lamp. There were a lot of people that carried me in a way during that time for various reasons. Like, I could never seem to pay my bills on time. And so I was always almost getting my car repossessed by the credit union that had given me the loan. And the woman at the little credit union in Utah always used to call me just before it was about to happen again and say, we really want you to keep your car. And so if you could just call me back and we could settle this, then we can make sure that you do. And I didn't like dealing with those kinds of things at that time either. So it would take her 2 or 3 times to call me before I could finally bear to call back and make my car payment so they wouldn't take my car. But she was so generous and patient and, didn't hound me, didn't just said, we would really like you to keep your car, so please call me back. And I also couldn't seem to work out how to set up my electric bill for my apartment. And so every month I would say to the landlord, I think it must have just gotten lost. Can we work out another way of paying it? And I'm not sure what's happening, He would say, well, why don't you just add it to your rent check and we'll, so there was just this kindness of people that carried me in ways that, I don't know, for no good reason, really, just the kindness of these people. And as I was having a hard time with my dad, my boss, every day at 2 o'clock would take me for a 30-minute walk And no matter what was happening, she'd take me for a 30-minute walk and she would say, we're just going to tune into the Tess channel for this time. That's our purpose of this walk. You can just say or not say anything you might want to say or not say. And sometimes I'd have a lot to say, and sometimes I'd cry, and sometimes we'd gossip about something else, and sometimes we'd say nothing. But it was just this way of her carrying me. But she also had a friend who she introduced to me around this time, who was like, I don't know, a legit San Francisco lesbian. Like, very proud of this fact, very, cargo shorts and short hair, and very and incredibly delightful person, and like almost 30 years older than I was. And very early into our meeting, amidst my confusion, there was some kind of chemistry. I was incredibly afraid of it because I didn't know what would it mean, and I don't know, am I attracted to this person, and even if I was, wouldn't that be weird? And there was all this stuff I was just kind of throwing up against the situation. And somehow that just didn't bother her at all. If I wanted to hang out, that was great. If I wanted to be friends, that was great. If I wanted to be more than friends one day and not the next day, that was fine. And there was never once a sense of that I owed anything, or that I had to have anything figured out, or that I was somehow responsible in a way that I couldn't at that time be responsible. There was just this kind of generosity. And most of what we did, we'd go out to dinner, which is why I couldn't usually pay my car payment on time. And she'd cook. She was very into food. And I would just sit on her counter and play music and talk to her. And or we'd do house projects, or we'd just like hang out. And I'd usually have like a hairbrush and a change of clothes in the back of my car. And she would tell me I was trolloping around again, if I'd come crash on the couch. And there was just this generosity of life and being in a time when my apartment had cats and a chair and a stereo, and that was it. And when my dad got sick and I had to go home for the first time and sort of face it, the night before I left, she took me to see Beach Blanket Babylon, which if you're in San Francisco, you know what this is. It's like sort of San Francisco's Politics Saturday Night Live or something. It's incredibly absurd and delightful and silly. And I remember there are a number of poodles that sing Run Around Sue into some kind of political ballad. And this was her way of sending me off to go home. And I was thinking about it this week, and it really was not a way of distracting me. It was part of the generosity and beauty of it. It was a kind of reminding me that there's a joy underneath even the most unbearably painful, difficult things. And she was someone who knew that very firsthand, because when she was about 18, she came down with myasthenia gravis, which is basically it's a degenerative muscular thing, but it basically means she almost died when she was 18. She couldn't move for about a year, and her muscles will just, if she gets too stressed, her muscles will start to fail. And you can even see now, if she gets too stressed, one side of her face will just start to droop, or her arm won't work, or And so in some way, very young, she was very intimate with the fact that uh, life is this moment, this life is very precious in some way. It's not to be taken for granted. And so there was a kind of, she had deer that would come into the back of her yard, and two fawns and a mother, and they'd get startled if she went outside. And one of the fawns, the little male, would know how to go back under the fence, but the female she called Cha-Cha. And Cha-Cha would just keep running into the fence to try to, she'd get excited. And so my friend would call herself Cha-Cha, Cha-Cha into the fence, that like just the nature of life, there's a joy in it. And it doesn't matter if you get through the fence the right way. You're here, you're having it. And so yeah, we started with this: you who seek the mystery in the daylight and in the shadows of the night, do not throw away your time. And there's a funny thing that happened, because you've all probably seen Jan Brogan's hourglass that's been part of this session. And about 2 days before our first leadership meeting, I'd had a meeting with someone, an astrologer, and he said, your symbol this year is the hourglass. And so when she pulled it out the other day, I thought, no shit. Look, there's an hourglass. It's coming for me. But the best part about it has been that her cat is obsessed with this hourglass. And so every so often, she just has to turn it over for the cat, who then earnestly watches it. And the cat will just sit and wait for her to turn it over now so that it can continue to watch the sands. And I thought, cats sort of prove themselves wise once again. Like, this hourglass of sand is not something to be angsted over. It's something fun. Like, you watch your life. It's fun. Look at it. There it goes. Turn it over again. Turn it over again. And the koan John talked about last night, what is your light? When you try to see it, it's dark, dark. In the kitchen pantry, the entrance gate. And there's one more line in that koan that Yunmen says to himself once again, that it's better to have nothing than something good. And my friend kind of got that, It wasn't, she wasn't trying to pin me to something or hold me to something or pin anything or get something. She was somehow with me in discovering something and just enjoying what might appear. And there was this kind of open-handed quality about it. It was incredibly generous, like the open boat just carrying. And Yunmen, not unlike my friend, as much as he talks about the dark, he has this incredibly infectious, joyful quality. Like, you get the impression, if you read enough of him, like, it was fun to be Yunmen. He was having a good time. He would sometimes say to the monks, he'd ask them some deep question, and then he'd turn around and answer for them and say, oh no, the master will be disappointed in what we have to say. And like, there's another koan where someone comes to him, they think they've discovered something profound, they're holding on to it, and they just do this to him, and he slaps them. And the person says, well, I was in the middle of explaining something. And Yunmen does this back to him, and the guy doesn't know what to say, so Yunmen slaps him again. And it's an almost kind of, Three Stooges Zen quality to him sometimes, that you can tell he's just dancing with people. He's just saying, where are you stuck? You don't have to be stuck. You can be here. You can be free. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about Sesshin and about this practice in a way, is that when I forget to be myself and I forget my problems and my stories and my memories and my all the things that I'm used to holding on to, and I forget, the trouble with things, joy just appears by itself. Like it's the thing that remains when everything else has fallen away. And I was noticing last night, like when John was asking about, well, where is your light? And I was looking at my lampshade here, and it has a slanted sort of fabric on it. And I just thought, God, I've never noticed that before. You don't think you would take delight in something like that, but there it is. Or watching the world of steam come into being from my teacup. It's like these little things that you didn't even know you wanted, you didn't even know you needed, all of a sudden are there with you, like all the little faces on screen. And I was noticing, particularly this time as I've been listening to people, how easy it is to think with that joy that it's something I have to earn or suffer for, or if I let it in, it's going to be taken away, or it's going to hurt because I might not have enough of it. And I have to either somehow refuse it or cling to it or keep track of it, or I don't have that open-handed quality that just lets it come and go by daylight, come and go by joy. And someone in particular was telling me that they noticed oftentimes when they come to Sesshin, even though they'd like to meet with me because they like the work we do together, they feel like they should talk to other teachers because it would be good for them and it would be good for their practice. And they've done this a couple times and then realized, oh, I'd actually just like to work on my koan with you. And they said they were just fighting themselves on it. No, it's good for you. No, it's bad for you. No, what do I? And then they realized, oh, I could just say I'd like to meet with you. That would be fine. And it doesn't have to mean something about me or me being a good student or a bad student or needing too much or not needing enough, and they realized, oh, there's all these other parts of their life that are just like that. That happiness is like pressing up against them with very easy things. They said this great thing. The things I want are not big things. They're like incredibly easy. I could just say yes to them. They're right here. Like I could go sit by the fire instead of standing in the cold. But somehow I don't think that that's allowed, or that I'm afraid of that. And I realize, oh, I don't have to be. I can just go sit by the fire. I can just trust my own heart mind to open and to move toward, and also trust it to receive, I think. And so I guess in a way, you don't have to worry about gaining or losing joy. And there's something about how it appears that's very intimately involved with allowing us to be us and allowing everything to be itself. And we were talking a bit yesterday after John Joseph's talk about the shadow. And it's like the shadow can be deep and dark. But a lot of times it's just stuff about us that we'd rather not be true, or that we're a little embarrassed about. And so we try so hard to keep it at bay. And then it ends up being all like tangly and gnarly and squirrely. And I was remembering, I have a friend who's very dramatic and loves to just, I think she'd love to be Oprah actually, if she could. I think in her own mind she is sometimes. And she came to my house once and said, we were all just kind of doing our thing, my partner and my friend and I, and she said, when we're old, let me tell you how it's going to go. I'm going to be the person who tells the same story over and over and over again. And my partner is going to be the person who's got 25 doctors and is always like with her medicines and all her everything. And she said, and you, meaning me, you're going to have like 25 chickens and cats and you're going to talk with each of them instead of talking to us. Just a second, Bobby's got something to say. And we all start laughing uproariously, right? My partner did not actually think this was very funny. And then I said, I think this is actually already true of all of us. And then we just started laughing uproariously some more. Like, it's sure, it might get a little bit more amplified, but like, we're already neurotic. We're already who we are. We're already who we are. We're not gonna change. We just get more free, actually. And there's something, it is very funny once you start to see that. It's funny. I remember sitting, one of the people in my graduate school cohort was telling us one day that when she gets really angry, she starts talking about herself in the third person. Jessica's very upset right now and she's not sure what to do. And she realized as she was telling us this, she'd never realized how absurd it is. And so she started laughing and just laughing and laughing and laughing and crying and laughing. That like, we're a little absurd. We're kind of beautiful, but we're absurd. And that's part of what makes us wonderful. We don't have to hold it so tight or take it quite so seriously. And there's freedom in that. There's freedom even in our dark parts. And I think it doesn't really stop. Like, it's not just for the bright parts of life that happens. And I stumbled on something sort of on the way to this retreat, which was a book about the Japanese and Chinese book about death poems, that in the same spirit of writing an enlightenment poem or any kind of other significant poem that kind of brings into being or language something discovered, that there's this old tradition in China and Japan, but this was particularly in Japan, of writing a death poem. And they evolved over time, and particularly as Zen, as Buddhism and then Zen kind of, soaked into the culture. And they went from sometimes being these incredibly poignant things about returning to the universe or returning to the mountain or becoming back to the air, or to sometimes the person writing this book said, the Japanese can be so conventional that sometimes people felt it was their one chance to sort of go against that being conventional and kind of actually be themselves. And you can find lots of them. Like there's some interesting, one by an ancestor in our tradition says, empty-handed I entered the world, barefoot I leave it. My coming, my going, two simple happenings that got entangled. I think, what is my life? I'm just kind of... But I found a section of them that was a bit more in this delight category that I want to share with you, because the more I read them, I actually was laughing out loud in my kitchen by myself. What they felt full of is just the way that death has that incredible gravitas, but entering that dark, And a number of people this retreat have talked to me about death. I think it's just inherent to that being on a boat with no oars territory, that it's the ultimate image in a way for the unknown. But as you'll see with these poems, it's really no different than encountering any other moment of your life. You appear. Your way of seeing and hoping to be seen or not seen appears. And there's humor in that. There's also a kind of beauty of just like, this is who we are. This is who we are. So one guy asked his poetry teacher to compose his death poem for him so that his wife would like it, which you already see like this is a little off track, right? Another person was so afraid that he might die without warning that he started writing his death poem in his 50s. And he worked with a teacher and he kept writing it. And when he was 88, he finally got one that he kind of liked and sent it to his teacher. And it says, "For 80 years and more, by the grace of my sovereign and my parents, I have lived with a tranquil heart between flowers and the moon." Which is pretty, but it's kind of earnest, you know, you can tell this is an earnest person. And so his teacher wrote back, "When you reach 90, correct the first line." And another guy grew ill in the spring, and by autumn he was sure he was dying, so he wrote his death poem. He says, "Before long I shall be a ghost, but just now how they bite my flesh, these winds of autumn." So you can tell he's suffering and he's ready. But then he recovered. And so he didn't, his death poem all of a sudden was, you know, it was just that. It was his experience then. He couldn't take it anywhere with him. Another guy, I think, in facing his death poem, he was a student of Basho's, and he was a bit arrogant. He said about himself that "I alone have gone straight to the heart of Basho." But he started to kind of see through this as he was facing his end of his life, and he said, "Till now, I thought that death befell the untalented alone. If those with talent too must die, surely they must make a better manure." And so he sees, like, you know, I even want my burial to be better. I want, you know, who do I think I'm being? Another person borrowed lines from another poet, and you already see, like, what do I think my death poem is going to say about me, you know? And he prefaces the poem by saying, "This is the last act of plagiarism I shall commit in this world." And so it just, you know, I mean, we're ridiculous. We're adorable. We're ridiculous. Someone else said, "I thought to live 2 centuries or 3, yet here comes death to me, a child of just 85 years old." You get a flavor of that person's spirit already. Another person said he realized he was going to be buried close to some haiku poets. He says, "I come to my grave, and to my delight I find beside me Kikaku and Icho, friends I can talk to." You see, oh, that's already, we get the nature of this person. Doesn't matter how long they live, actually. They're here. They're alive. They're themselves. Another person says, "Bury me when I die beneath a wine barrel in a tavern. With any luck, the cask will leak." And it was not unusual, in fact, to write your death poem and then recover. This was like a thing. And it throws that whole uncertainty thing into the equation. But this person wrote a couple after his, because I think he began to see it as also a little bit funny. After recovery, he polishes the style of his death poem. The mouth that has uttered a death poem now devours porridge. See, yes. Life. Life, like we have it. It's here. Life. This person also wrote, the doctors praise his death poem and depart. See, like, what do I think I'm doing? You know, my life is for me somehow. It's for me. It's for me. And I think that's it. It's like we reveal ourselves at every turn, actually. There's no getting away from it. And that's what's beautiful. That ends up being what's so nice about being you and being here, is that you don't have to. And even your death poem, it's for you. It's for you. One last little story. There was a guy who was an artist and a poet, and he could dance and play instruments and sing, and he would travel around, and everyone who met him, he would just make them happy. And there was an innkeeper who walked up to him and said, you know, you gladden people's hearts and you don't make trouble with people, and you'd make a really great monk, you know, would you consider joining the way? And he said, sure. And he shaved his head and he said, I'm glad to be rid of all this grease, you know, that I've been carrying around. And so he put on robes, and he did exactly the same thing, where he tried to stay at the inn, but then he just traveled around and played his instruments and wrote his poems and did his paintings. And because he was now a monk, a number of the people at the inn tried to court him to come give them wisdom or give him praise, and he didn't really like that. And he would just say to them, I desire nothing but the view of Mount Fuji. It was just, that's what he wanted. He just wanted the view of Mount Fuji. And one day they found his body in the snow outside the temple gate. He was dressed in beggar's clothing and wrapped in a straw gown. And beside his head there was a little scrap of paper that said, Mount Fuji's melting snow is the ink with which I sign my life's scroll. Yours sincerely. And so he just, you know, it didn't matter really. Like, we're here to enjoy. And it doesn't mean there aren't dark parts. There are. And somehow those kind of, they hollow us out. They deepen us in some way. They make us vulnerable and reachable and closer. But underneath that, sort of holding up everything, you really understand what Yun Men was getting at when he said, you know, this is another Yun Men answering himself sort of koan. He said, I'm not asking you about before the full moon, I mean before enlightenment. Come and say a word or two about the full moon, after the full moon. He responded to his own request, every day is a good day. And I think when you don't have to get away from anything, especially about yourself, or about other people, or about lampshades, or anything really, every day is a good day. This morning as I was just as I woke up, I looked out over the hills, and it was about 30 below here last night, so there's just this stark, cold, sharp, beautiful blue. And just over the hills, just almost exactly like in this collage, the moon was setting. And it was this deep orange. And the windows were cold. I couldn't even get close to them. It was so cold, but it was so arresting just to see the beauty of the moon and think, we're here in Sesshin. We get to have this. We get to be here. Get to be with these people. We don't really know what we're doing. I have no idea what we're doing, but we're here. We're doing this. So thanks. Thanks for being here.